Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Sold Sign Real Estate Unplugged. We are your hosts and favorite realtors, Naya
and Lauren.
And we're happy to be back another week. So let's get right into this week's story.
I recently worked with a couple who were selling their home while waiting for their new build to be completed. They were nervous about timing everything perfectly. What if they sold their home too quickly and had nowhere to stay? On the flip side, they didn't want to miss the chance to sell in a competitive market. After discussing their options, we decided a post-occupancy agreement might be the perfect solution. It allowed them to sell their house and stay in it temporarily as renters while their new home was being finished. This agreement gave them peace of mind. They could secure the sale but wouldn't need to scramble to find temporary housing. The buyers were a young couple relocating for work. They weren't in a rush to move, so they were open to the idea. We negotiated a post-occupancy agreement where the sellers would stay in the home for 45 days after closing, essentially renting it back from the buyers. This gave the sellers breathing room while ensuring the buyers secured the property. During the negotiation, we ironed out every detail: a daily rent amount, a security deposit, and clear terms on who would cover utilities and maintenance during the agreement period. Both parties agreed the home would remain in its current condition and an inspection would follow the seller's departure to confirm no damages occurred. The agreement went smoothly. The sellers moved out as scheduled. The buyers moved in on time, and both sides felt the agreement was fair and transparent. Man, I like when a post, I know, I love when a post occupancy works out that way.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they don't, but I feel like majority of the time they do.
They do.
And if you have a good agent, you have a good realtor who has a seller. So let's say you're working with the seller, I'm working with the buyer. If you are telling your seller like up front exactly what to do and lay out the terms, like very transparent, which you always are, just letting them know up front, this is how we're going to do it. And then in the listing, you're going to put in there, hey, my clients are asking for a rent back.
Right.
So that way, when my buyers look at the listing, they immediately know, okay, this house is perfect and we're not necessarily in a rush to move. So they need a 45-day rent back because you put it in the listing.
Yep.
They need a 45-day rent back. Great. We don't need to move for 2 months, for 60 days. So that actually works out well. But at least my buyers they're not in the competitive market. They know that they have a house. Now they can take their time to move. They can schedule movers because maybe they're moving out of state. So it just works out really well. So when you have both sides, like both realtors really keeping their clients, I feel like up to date on everything and letting them know up front, it can work out very well.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
That situation can work out so well, especially telling them up front. Like you telling your sellers up front or putting it in the listing helps my clients.
Yeah.
Because if you tell us later,
I know. And it's like, no, I was ready 30 days to the T to move my TV, my bed and everything.
And now you saying, now you're going, I got to tell my buyers.
Please don't do it later. Oh, please don't do it later.
That would hurt. No, I got to tell my buyers.
I mean, because sometimes it still works, but just do it up front.
Right. I feel like that way everyone knows you're transparent. Yeah. There's no hiding. It was already in the listing. So it's not like, what? Why are you coming to us now? We're 15 days away from closing, and now you're saying, "Oh man, my you may be saying, "Hey, my seller's home didn't get finished yet. We need another 15 to 30 days." Now, what are my buyers going to do? How do you know that my buyers,
where are they coming from?
Exactly. How do you know their lease isn't up? And that's why they chose this house, because they knew they can get in within 30 days.
Yeah.
Now what happens? So that's something that can definitely go wrong. The buyers are in the lease and they have to get out.
That's not.
And then some. So I feel like talking about it with all parties up front is definitely, for me, the way to go.
Yeah. And so as a seller, know that you have that option, or that, it's available to you, and it may be something you need to consider, if you have some wiggle room, or you need to have some wiggle room in your next transition. it's something that you want to talk about early on with your realtor, so that, because everything, again, is a domino effect.
Right.
You're affecting all parties, not just what you need to do next, but where your buyers are coming from and what they have going on. So it's a domino effect. It's just better to have all information, timelines, all of that up front. And, you know, once things get rolling, you're in binding contracts. And so everybody has to follow through on what they signed. And so it's always just better to have all of the details, all of the information, and everybody be on the same page.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Especially those details. Oh,
yeah.
Naya, those
yeah.
details.
So the details. Yes. So, and it was mentioned here. So where is it at? You want to, okay. Yes. So you want to be sure to discuss the daily rent amount.
No, let's just talk about that first. Let's start there. we gotta break these down. Okay?
Yeah, so there's a list of things that are like, you know, within this post occupancy agreement that are important. The details of it, the fine line details are important for the seller and the buyer to know, to sign, to agree on in order to move forward smoothly.
Yeah.
So the daily rent amount. Sometimes, so if you do like a 30-day or a 45-day, the seller may ask for, wait, hold on.
You so silly.
The seller may, well, the buyer then may divide what their mortgage payment will be by the 30 days or the 45 days and charge that as rent for the seller to continue staying there and renting it back from them.
So the buyer turns into the landlord.
Because the buyer now owns, on the settlement date, the buyer is now the owner of the property. And although the seller will remain for that 30 or 45 days, they're remaining there as a tenant, renting it back. So,
because of post occupancy, which I feel like
I know maybe
didn't even
we read through the story and it explained it, but maybe we didn't define it.
Like what a post occupancy, what it is. It's pretty much when, like Naya said, the buyer is now going to turn into the landlord and the seller is going to turn into the tenant. So they're going to rent the house back from the buyer. So even though they put on there that the seller needs a 45-day rent back, that doesn't mean that they don't buy the house for 45 days. It just means that after they buy the house, they need an additional 45 days to stay there so that they can finish doing what they need to do. So the seller sells the house, the buyer buys it. Now the buyer turns into the owner of the house and the seller is now again the tenant. And the buyer's going to say, buyer/landlord at this point is going to say, okay, you want to stay in my house for an additional 45 days? Great. This is how much I'm going to charge you rent. And like Naya was saying, they can charge based on whatever their mortgage payment is, whatever the new buyer, whatever their mortgage payment is, they can charge the current tenant and say, this is what your daily rate is going to be. And this is how much you would pay me.
Yes.
So
that's pretty much a simple way to do it.
that's a simple way. Yeah. That's one way to do it. Yeah.
Another way is nominal
Consideration.
Consideration. What does that mean?
That means you are pretty much you as the buyer are going to offer the seller, they're going to offer them to stay in your house for no cost. So that means, the reason why a buyer would allow that or would do that is if you were in an extremely competitive situation in a complete, very competitive market and you want this house so bad, so you're like, you know what, we're going to offer over asking and then we're going to also offer you a free rent back. So you can stay in this house, in our house that we're going to buy. You can stay in it for an additional 45 days and we're not going to charge you any rent. So you're wondering well, why would a buyer do that? Well, they really want the house. And remember, when you buy a house, you are not really making your first mortgage payment until probably 45 days, 30 days. So if you buy a house in January, anytime in January, your first mortgage payment is not due till March. So let's say the sellers are going to move out February 28th. cool. Now you get to move in March 1st, and that's also when your mortgage payment is due. So that can work out for some people. Some other people are like, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. But that's a good way to get you into a house, to not like make
Charge
sure that the
them
seller
back. Yeah.
That's a great way.
So something to think about.
Yeah. So those are two ways
Yeah.
you can do it for free, nominal consideration. You can charge the seller whatever your mortgage payment is. And then the third way would be like a flat fee. You can just charge them like, hey, I'm going to charge you $3,000 for you to rent out my house. So you have a few ways that you can go about it. And that's really up to you as the buyer. That's kind of in your hands. But just understand, if you are in that competitive market where you know the house got 10 offers on it, you want your offer to stand out, and you may want to just offer, or you can also offer like, we'll charge you for the first 30 days, or we'll charge you for the first 15 days, and then we won't charge you after, or we'll charge you for the first 30 days and we won't charge you for the remaining 15 days. Like you can get creative with it, which is why I really like that document, because it's an addendum, and you do have to fill all of this information out, and then all parties have to sign. But I feel like it's a great way for both sides to kind of get what they want. And, you know, if you're okay with it, I love a nominal consideration.
Yeah, okay.
Especially when, of course I would like it. But if you want the house, sometimes that's what you kind of got to do. So.
And I love that you said, like, your first mortgage payment is not going to be right away. So it's not going to, most times, hopefully not, like, stretch you to just do nominal consideration.
Right. Because a lot of times it's not like 45 days. It's good like 30 days, maybe. Usually max is 30.
And sometimes you'll find that the seller will say 30 days, but they might be out on day 20.
Right.
So, you know, they still might not even really end up using that whole time period.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you got in earlier. So,
yep. I like that. Okay.
And then so you'll figure out whatever that rent amount is going to be. You'll do a security deposit also, and that's just like if you were renting anything. You would place a security deposit to be sure that they had something to pull some funds from in case there's any damages.
Because the seller is going to put that security deposit down, and it'll be held with the like title company. Yeah. And then as long as when the new buyer moves in, as long as everything is good, then the sellers will get that security deposit back. You know, they don't keep it. They will get it back.
Yes. So, and then utilities and maintenance during the agreement period. How do you normally see this?
Usually it's whoever is living there. So if the you know, if the seller is still there, still staying in the house, then I'm like, you're covering the utilities. Yeah. And sometimes like they won't change it over
exactly
until you move in. Yeah, like you're not changing over the, you know, the utilities until the new buyer moves in, because then, you know, you may have to then pay them if they do happen to, like, if the new buyer does change over before that time, then you may have to just pay them whatever it is. But I feel like don't worry about it.
Don't do all that.
Yeah. Don't do it until you move in, and then, because you don't know how much they're going to be using, you know, how much water and electricity and, you know, whatever heat, AC, you don't know. So you might as well just keep it in their name until then.
I agree. That's basically what it is. The fine line details that you want to make sure, you know, you all agree and decide on. And then that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Can I talk about if you don't really quick?
If you don't
follow through with
what's
it
agreed upon.
Yeah. So if you are in a situation, which we have been in, if you are a realtor and you have the buyer, so let's say this is me, I have the buyer and I put in an offer, my buyer's put in an offer on Naya's property, on her seller's property. If I present in my offer, when I present the offer in whole, like with the contract and everything, my post-occupancy addendum is inside that contract that I submit to them. So they're looking at everything as a whole. So when I submit it, I need to fill it out. And when I fill it out, I need to fill out everything, right? So if I check off nominal consideration and then I don't fill out the security deposit part, because honestly, it's really no point to put security deposit if you're doing nominal consideration. So if you don't put a security deposit and then all parties sign, meaning the seller, my buyers have signed it, sent it over to you and your sellers have signed it and agreed upon, it's like binding. That is a contract.
Yeah.
So if Naya comes back 15 days later, while we are like wrapping this up, we're about to close, and she says, hey, I'm sending over a post-occupancy addendum, I'm kind of like, wait, we already signed the post-occupancy addendum. And she may say, no, I didn't. Well, I did send you one, but that wasn't right. I need to send you a new one. And I'm thinking, well, why would you need to send me a new one? You already put on there nominal consider, whatever she put on there was already signed. Naya comes back and says, well, we really wanted to do like whatever my buyer's mortgage payment is.
Split it up.
My seller's mortgage payment. And I'm like, no, it doesn't.
Because that's not what was agreed upon.
Like you would tell me that's not what it wasn't agreed upon. That. So it wouldn't make any sense to do that. So no, it doesn't. Whatever is on there, you can't go back a few days later and then change it, because all parties have already signed it. And your offer, like Naya probably wouldn't have accepted my offer if I said, hey, I want to charge you a certain amount. She may not have accepted the offer, but because we presented it with nominal consideration, she decided, oh, okay. And her seller said, oh, okay, this is great. We're going to accept it. And that's what it is. Yeah. So
it changes things.
Yeah. So me as the buyer's agent, I would have to be prepared and know, oh, okay, I either messed up and I got to go back and tell my buyer like that we shouldn't have put nominal consideration in the first place. We should have just did whatever the mortgage payment is. Because if you do whatever the mortgage payment is, you just have to wait until later to find out what the mortgage payment is. And that's what it's going to be.
Yes.
But if you put nominal consideration, that's what it is. Nominal consideration. So all I'm saying is make sure you put the details in there correctly so that all parties understand.
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
Yes.
That's it.
And in this story, they mentioned that everything was smooth, everything went as scheduled. And so that's why spending a little bit of time to think about what you need, what you want to offer as a buyer, seller, within this post-occupancy realm and agreement, want to really take, a moment to check and be honest about, will this work? How's it going to work? Everybody agree to the details and then move on from there.
Yeah, I agree.
So, oh yeah,
I know. I don't know. I want to, but I'm like, I don't want to keep talking. Just for the sellers, when you are still in the house, I feel like you have to make sure that the house is still in the same condition.
Oh yes.
When the buyer saw it. So even though you are staying there for an additional, 45 days or however long you're staying there, when you're moving out and, you're bringing furniture down, that house still needs to be in the same condition it was when the buyers first saw it and they put an offer in on it, because I feel like that's not fair to the buyers. And also their buyers, make sure you do 2 walkthroughs. Yes. So you're going to do a final walkthrough before you purchase the house, like before you go and actually buy it. Then you're going to do a second walkthrough before you actually move in, before the sellers move out, to make sure that the house is how it was supposed to be. Because if it's not, don't forget the sellers provided a security deposit. So if for whatever reason something is not the way that it should have been when you first saw it or when you bought the house the first time, like the walkthrough, then you can go back and say, hey, this is not how you were supposed to leave this house, telling the seller. And then, you may be able to keep their security deposit. I don't want you to, but that just may be the case if the sellers don't uphold their end of the agreement and keeping the house in the same condition that it was. Yeah. So that was
a very good point. No, that's a very good point. You want to be considerate always, and no matter what side you're on, think about it. Think about how you would want it to be for you, on the other side. So sellers, be careful. Don't scratch up the walls or anything while you're carrying furniture out. That was a really good point.
Yeah.
So I think we have covered everything on post-occupancy agreements. Hopefully you'll feel confident to use one if that works for you. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Remember that you can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, hopefully, and all other podcast platforms. So we can't wait to see you there. Oh, and I forgot YouTube, of course.
Yes.
Always thank you for watching our visuals on YouTube and for sharing and liking and subscribing. See you next week.